So, Zan, let's start off in a bit more of a philosophical direction. And one of the things that I've heard you say over the last 6 months or so, which I don't think we've unpacked, is based on some of your trips to England, London, and Oxford, and hanging around with, let's say, next wave philosophy folk. One of the things that you've commented on to me has been that there is a feeling in some of the evolving edges of philosophy that the next needed philosophy that's going to hit the mainstream or make waves, particularly online, is going to be based around, or is going to have at least as a central focus, the relationship between men and women, and
Mhm.
and possibly the private domestic relationship between men and women. And I don't think we've fleshed that out any more than just that. Like hearing you say, "Oh, there's been whispers that actually this is where people recognize that it's needed to go." Um, how would you describe what you've been hearing and sensing from uh, the philosophy department, and how do you see things yourself in this regard? What place does the private personal relationship have in us having a viable and beautiful philosophy that's going to
Yeah,
move the world forward?
I think in my discourse with these various movers and shakers who are trying to restore a conversation about this type of um, re- reflection, um, we're based on like my whole work has been based for 25 years as well on the relationship of men and women, our relationship to each other from the thou and me, and and we've always had that as our starting point to a life well lived, to a life of art, to a transcendent experience, to a spiritual journey. It's been our launch point, and so I haven't really heard from the academics and the new thinkers out there that not necessarily that men and women, that the subject of men and women is where everything will be the wellspring to come forth with some new kind of cultural thinking. But it's certainly my impression. It's my intuition, my gut instinct is that we are, Ars Amorata has tapped into the base essence of what it's going to take to have a better cultural conversation. So, because maybe somebody else would say, well, art should lead the forefront, or, you know,
Mm.
or music or something. But it's all those in lockstep. But I think the conversation of men and women is what we have focused on all these years, and I think that it is the perfect launch pad to restart a generative, um, life giving conversation about culture and beauty and curiosity, mystique, all these things. So it's kind of mostly my impression that it stems from men and women in the conversation of that and the polarity thereof.
Okay, so it's less that there is this flourishing recognition in the massive philosophy that puts our men's relationship to women at the as a fundamental building block.
Right.
Rather, it's more your own apportation that actually there's only so far philosophy can move
Yeah,
forward unless we put this in a central place.
that's right. So
Okay.
like what I am getting, because I there's a lot of people trying to recover this conversation and to restore a cultural spirit back into the forefront. We've stripped culture and art and this kind of stuff and relegated it to the back in our secular age with science and everything, which I love. But we've taken away the spirit and the soul of something of humanity to a degree. And there's a lot of voices that are saying this, return this. What Ars Amorata and our focus is that a aesthetic piece of that. So we don't talk politically, we don't talk socially, we don't talk um, um, societally, economically. We don't have these kind of conversations. There's all these voices that are talking about those things. We're talking about the restoration of the aesthetic piece of this new cultural conversation that wants to be born.
Hmm. So we have in the past talked about the aesthetic piece or the importance of aesthetics in philosophy, also in our own lives. And you've written, I mean, a whole book about your philosophy of men and women, or at least one view or one strand of that philosophy. But what I haven't explored with you is, let's say we understand and really examine the relationship of men and women and what that is and the potentials and the pitfalls therein. What is the place of that in broader philosophy or broader cultural regeneration?
Um, Rephrase that question. I
Yeah,
couldn't
so
sure.
we've talked about aesthetics in philosophy before in episodes of our
Yeah.
podcast, um, and you've written in your book pieces of a philosophical system that a man
Yeah.
can
Yes.
incorporate in his relationship to women that would be helpful in a number of ways. So you have a philosophy of men and women, but one thing that I haven't really sunk into with you is the place and the function of a great philosophy of men and women in the center of an overall philosophy. So how
Mm.
does this therefore link up? What does this then potentiate within a person's philosophy or within a culturally regenerating philosophy at large? The fact that we actually consider our intimate private relationship with
Well,
the opposite sex.
it's the number one conversation on it's number one conversation on earth in any group of people when it comes to relationships and how we relate. It shoots to the top of the conversation. So everybody across the spectrum has the a question in their mind about the way they show up in the world, the way they represent themselves to the opposite sex, the way they are in relationship with their wife or their husband. Everybody's got this question and wants to improve or understand or enhance their understanding and their personal situation. So, um, so leading with that, you get the audience is there. Like everybody's ears perk up when you're talking about men and women, and
Mm-hmm.
and the concept thereof. So, um, and it's a low conversation. Like it's you can talk about it in pubs. It's a high conversation. You can talk about it in the highest echelon of society. Everybody's got this their ear leaned in. Well, I want to know more about this. So, what I guess I'm saying is it's a universal. It's a universal fundamental desire to understand something on the relationship level with the way we relate to other people, especially the opposite sex. Um, and so it's culturally relevant.
I would say, from my kind of paltry knowledge of the history of philosophy, tackling our intimate relationships is very little potentiated. Like, if we go back to Greece, my memories of the ancient Greeks who founded Western philosophy and Western civilization were more interested in younger boys that they could hang
Yeah.
around. There's no mention of really women that I can remember. There seems to be investigations into the source of light and the perfect note, as you put it, the essence of truth and how one should live in the world. Um, but this drive for rationality, rational and mental clarity, seems to automatically put a philosopher in a more male or masculine direction and wants to perhaps save him from everything that is irrational, emotional, feminine, and I guess projected onto women. So it seems like already philosophy is a boys' club, and then
Well, Yeah, that could be true. Yeah, go ahead.
And if you think of the history of philosophers as well, you've got these kind of Nietzschean figures. Nietzsche, what I heard of him is he had sex once in his life, and it was with a prostitute from who he contracted syphilis, and that was the end of things. And if I think back to my philosophy departments as well, it was like, let's cloister ourselves in the citadel of the mind, so we don't have to deal with these personally uncomfortable things that are our own feelings, our own irrational nature, which I believe our irrational nature is as important as a part as our rational nature, and obviously the effects of women who seem to destroy many high-minded men just with the difficulty of relating to them.
I mean, it's true. Like maybe if you want to be a true philosopher in the purest sense of the word, you have to be a recluse. And like Immanuel Kant lived to whatever 70s in Germany. He never left his little village ever. He never went anywhere.
Right,
you know,
right.
Wrote some of the most fundamental philosophical treatises we have. Maybe that's what we should do. Isolate ourselves, Jordan. Go off the grid.
Right. And that starts to sound really funny, that the most important philosophical treatises that we have are from men that enclosed themselves in some little village and figured it all out. And within that, there's like, what life experience do you have, or what worldliness, or what embodied experience of, very challenging perspectives would a person like that be able to achieve?
This is what's interesting.
It would be very difficult, actually, in today's climate to be accepted without the taking on of such multiple perspectives that you would get through travel and working with people that are different from you.
Is these thinkers came up with these thoughts by sitting in pure reason and consideration. Obviously, they didn't have life experience. Like Immanuel Kant didn't go anywhere, so he didn't travel. He didn't see another country. He didn't, I don't think he saw another town, and they came up with these deep philosophical, layered concepts that have changed the way we think, that influence mankind and humankind. And same with Einstein, like his was purely mathematically philosophical thinking. He just sat and explored the worlds in his mind and came up with these ideas. Newton as well. So the difference between those geniuses and you and me is we get our philosophy from the dirt, from our travels and from our wandering around the earth. We have tons of experience, the opposite of those guys. But if we have any philosophical bent, it's because it's hard scrabbled and hard won and dug out of the dirt.
You could even criticize a concept like the Alabaster girl as well, and some high-minded philosophical men, and the perception of women as being like this. What is the nature of true beauty in a woman, which has its sublime qualities to it, but also can be quite distanced from the reality of women. And I certainly know myself and some of the men that I've spoken to, contemplating the Alabaster girl often means contemplating someone that doesn't actually exist. It's just a perfected ideal. And when you go and meet the reality of woman, she might have a bit of Alabaster girl in her, but usually she's got a lot of other stuff as well. Like the living contours of a real human is very different to our philosophically idealized girl that we think of, from our great
of course,
block
but
in
same with us.
University.
We have this stylized, idealized version of ourselves that we wish we were. Like Cary Grant said, everybody wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant. Because it's the same alabaster spirit we have of ourselves. We have this thing, this archetype that we want to excel to, or we want to grow into, or become. And we're all broken, So it's like that. I mean, that's the underpinning of this, is that we have this. We're the ideal of the Alabaster girl, this shimmering vision that we have of the feminine spirit, is not something you're going to obtain, but it's something that you're going to sit in exploration of and consideration of all of your days. So you're contemplating beauty and wondering what it is. And it's not something you're going to obtain that perfect girl, because she's not perfect. She leaves the cap off the toothpaste, or whatever it is. Hey, what are you doing? And you're not perfect. You're not going to find that perfect you that self-helps your way to glory.
Yeah.
You're going to find that.
The idealized self-image that I hope one day to be, if only I take enough courses and do all the right things and
Right.
scale my business and my body to acceptable levels or whatever it is. A lot of us are in chase of an idealized image of the self. Yeah.
For sure. And it never measures up, and we beat ourselves up, and we don't forgive ourselves, and we get bound up and constricted into the thinking that could have done it better. I'm not doing it right. I'm not doing my self-help instructions the way it should be, because I still feel empty, and I still feel lonely, and I still feel not confident. Like I read a book about confidence, and here's the exercises for it, and here's the case studies that were in the book of Frank that did this, and Albert. And so I want to be like Frank and Albert, and we don't get there we're at the end of the book, so we buy the next book, the sequel of that one, or some other book, and we continue the cycle, and we just never feel like we're measuring up ever.
So this idea, I'm looking at it very sportingly, of a new practical philosophy that is needed to somehow move us forward, move the culture forward, which is a good philosophy or a meeting point between men and women. I got three questions, light ones. I'll just float them out there and respond to what takes you. The first is anyone doing this at the moment, or do we have any promising threads that we can work from in terms of a philosophy of relationship, or a philosophy that includes intimate relationship? The second one would be, is philosophy even the tool that we need? Because if we're thinking in abstract and rational terms, that might actually be a blunt tool when it comes to relationship, for all the reasons that we've just said. We're stuck in idealizations and so on, rather than perhaps meeting reality. Because the mind, I don't think, is the best tool for mediating directly with reality. And I'll float those two out there for the moment.
The first question is,
do we have any threads from which to work? Like, who's doing this?
no. There's nothing. There's nobody that I know I'm having this conversation at all. There's nobody that's talking on that, with that ground, with the focus that we're focused on. We're the only ones, as far as I know. Straight up. Yeah. Can you think of anything? Because maybe I'm wrong. There's a lot of dating. There's a lot of, but the philosophical side of it, like the transcendent side of relationships, what it means to be in communion with another, what it means to have ourselves reflected in another. Sure, there's psychologists and stuff that are maybe digging into psyche and these various things like that, but we're talking. I don't know anybody else that is talking about the concept of the philosophy, the worship of beauty in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody. I mean, this is why we've hit a nerve out there,
I think there are a small few dating coaches that do have a philosophy. The ones that I've seen, I would say, are kind of rational male based, which I think is a limited philosophy, which dehumanizes actually us down to biological organisms that are fending for ourselves in an evolutionary war. It forgets the multitudinous aspect of a human, which is we're more than just rational. We have many different aspects. There is like a greater sublime potential that many of us know and embody in different ways. So it's like we're much more than just a biological agent looking to win the sperm war, or up hypergamy and up level the security. That there's more to a human than just this. So it falls very flat. One person that I would say that's got something is Alain de Botton, kind of a popular philosopher.
Yeah. Okay.
He's written a couple of nice books. He wrote a great book called Essays on Love, and shockingly, he was 23 when he wrote this.
Ah.
And it's the philosophical experience of a young man who falls flat in his face. You know, I think he has a relationship or two during the course of the book, but they're very messy, limerent affairs, like through his own nerves and not knowing what to do. He creates a big mess. The women dump him. He idealizes the woman, and it's a great. Maybe it's not philosophical. Maybe it's like kind of a compassionate guide to the things that happen to us in our 20s and beyond,
Oh.
because of the messiness of our own psyche and how little illumined they are when it comes to love and falling in love, right? And he's got a kind of follow-up book to that called The Course of Love, I think it's called. And this time the
Oh.
protagonist, whether it's Alain or, character that he's written, is probably 20 years later, and he's in the midst of a marriage with all of its challenges. And he talks about the different phases of relationship and just the absurd difficulties in getting yourself across to your partner honestly and in a way that's, speaks from the guts and the truth of who you are, but the difficulty of seeing an evolving person over the years with their own fluctuating kind of shifts, their needs. Is it possible for two people to actually meet? What is love? Is it different from obviously erotic love? Is it different even from the simple company that we share?
Right.
What's left in a loving relationship, even when the disconnection is high? So he tackles more of the kind of middle-age questions of the nature of love.
You read these
Yeah,
books?
I read both of those books. I feel like I really received quite a lot from them. But it's the closest example I've seen of a trained philosopher using philosophical tools to sit in the middle of a relationship with all of its very personal difficulty, and then he expresses that in a way that, again, philosophy seems a little bit of a blunt way for him to express that. I think the books shine as psychological and first-person contemplative emotional accounts of the actual experience of being in relationship, which is less a philosophical deviation or kind of digression or abstraction of being in relationship.
It's interesting because there's kind of a two-pronged approach here that you say he kind of has in his books, which is a philosophical approach and then a psychological approach. And I think in our modern age, the tendency is to go down the psychological approach and certainly evolutionary biology and why we want to spread our seed. And here's the explanation on a mechanical level and a biological level and an animalistic level. And then there's the psychology. So that's the scientific approach, which is basic human needs, and that's, reproduce and keep evolution going. And then there's the psychological approach, is like, why are we attracted to something? Why do we have certain fetishes? Why do we get our heart broken? Why do we repeat the patterns in relationships we always do? And there's a ton of books and works on that. And then the philosophical side of things, maybe you said, like you said, this Alain Botton is in these books, he approaches that. We're only that. I've never talked about biology or urges or needs, or really, we've talked about it, but not on that level. We want to know why, as opposed to the how or the what. So us is like, what is the peak experience that the maximum extraction we can get from the experience in our relationships and elevate ourselves in our spirit and others. So it's very much a approach.
That's a question that you're asking.
Well, the thing is, Jordan, like with philosophy is thought experiments, just simplified. It's like psychology is trying to describe the the psychology behind things, and mechanics, or the science is trying to describe the mechanics of things, the biology of things. And we're trying to have the question of thought, like Ars Amorata, all thought experiments. There's no answers in it. It's just thought experiments. What about this? And maybe that. And I never thought about this before, but could be this. That's what it feels
Yes,
like to me.
right. So this is interesting because you're separating now philosophy. I think what we've had over recent years, at least the people that I've read, are multidisciplinary thinkers, or thinkers that are actually quite fused with their own personal experience and then might add different questions from perspectives. Now, if you cleanse this out and go pure philosophy, which it sounds like you're trying to do here, if you go pure philosophy and you look at the intimate relationship, what are some of the questions and tools and approaches that you're left with? And I think you just named one question, but that's where I wanted to head. Like, what are your tools, and how does a person, a listener, um, start to tackle intimate relationships philosophically? And what thought experiments
Oh,
do we have?
yeah. And how is it practical? Like, how does it help me? I mean,
We'll
like,
come. Yeah, let's come to this later, right? But
okay.
just
So
pure
I think
philosophy.
the pure philosophy of it is to consider, well, to go back to the essence of you, and the fundamental questions of why are you here? And maybe there is no answer to that. Maybe you're just here by a biological accident. But at least you're considering it. At least you're pondering it, because then you can go to the larger questions of life. It's like, now that I am here, it's evident that I'm here. How can I maximize this spell that I have from cradle to grave? How can I really derive out of it maximal, for lack of a better word, good for myself and for others? How can I, and why is that important? Why is it important to have a life well lived, as opposed to a scrabbling, hard, um, hard existence where there's no meaning and um, no sense of abundance or satisfaction, or accomplishment? What's the difference? Who's to say one life is better than the other? So these questions. So, for instance, a young man, I would completely urge him to look at his life in a philosophical sense, and look at it as a narrative and a journey and a myth that he's creating page to page. He's writing it. He's writing his story, and you want to look back on that story and turn the pages and look at what where you've been. And you don't get that if you're driving the tow truck and watching TV at night, watching the bad news at night. You don't get that. You just have another day that goes by. So um, I just have the sense that a young man, my goodness, like a 20-year-old man that's just fresh and just trying to figure out life and has no clue and is nervous and stuff like that. Man, if you could just you've tapped into the philosophy of the life you've been given, the philosophical approach to your years coming up, and the contemplative approach, contemplation, to consider. If you just could tap into that, what a glorious path you would have, no matter the bad stuff that come your way, because bad stuff is going to come your way. It's the way it is. It's not all hunky-dory Pangloss from Voltaire's Candide, where it's the best of all possible worlds. It's, no matter what happens, it's and there's a reflection in it. So, but what a way to put forward, rather than the economics of life and how to make money and how to get security and how to do this kind of stuff. Those things, accept that they will come if you head toward a philosophical approach to life and put that forefront, that idea. And what it means, I don't know, but just to have a contemplative concept of your life going forward.
So I hear two thought experiments here. The first is, why am I here? Why are we here? What's the kind of meaning of that? And the second one, which I think is the more practical of the two, how can I maximize this experience that I've been given, that I have?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's That's the essence of the title of the Alabaster Girl. The simple poem I wrote. Man has only ever searched for three things in this world: the source of light, the perfect note, and Alabaster Girl. So the first thing is the source of light. Why are we here? What started all this? And the perfect note. Now that we're here, how do I live it with a musicality that sounds pitch perfect?
Hmm.
And the third thing is the Alabaster Girl, which is our ideal of the grace and salvation that we want. That's the essence of where it came from. I wrote the poem when I was young.
It sounds like going back to the whole context of this episode and what I asked you about, what is the place of men and women and our intimate relationship in the broader field of philosophy moving forward as a way to regenerate something in this culture which so much is breaking. It seems like this one question or this one thought to experiment: how can I maximize the experience that I have in my intimate relationships? How can I maximize this experience I have with the opposite sex? Is the one question that's missing, that you say in today's philosophical conversation, and is the one inquiry that could blow things open in a very powerful and beneficial way.
100% what I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And how many people do you know that are really asking that question sincerely?
I don't know. Yeah. Right. You?
Aside from the Amorati, or some of the Amorati that I've known,
Yes. 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 Yes.
I've run across a few women that held that question like their lives depended on it. So I've known women that have told me, you know what, since I was a little girl, I always asked myself the question. No, I didn't ask myself the question. I declared for myself, I want to have an extraordinary relationship. There's only one thing I want in this life, and it's to love and to have an extraordinary relationship and give myself extraordinarily within it. I've never heard men say that unless absolutely intoxicated in some idealistic, they've fallen in love with someone and temporarily they want to give themselves in that way. But typically I don't run into that very often. I sense that maybe people are more into the survival or social instincts rather than a sexual or romantic instinct. And at least the sexual instinct is more like, how can I get laid, get off, not be a loser because I'm getting laid, show everyone that I'm cool because I'm getting laid, but not how can I actually involve the pleasure of sex in an inquiry of how can I maximize this entire experience with the woman that I'm with.
Well, then even those conversations, I was like, imagine that is, I think you said these women, their highest aspiration is to maximize their relationship and have the greatest relationship they can. If that's the end goal, I mean, that's great. But what we're talking about is something more expensive than that. It starts with our relationship, but it's a relationship with ourselves and with the it's a larger thing than just our personal relationship is going to satisfy us if I get a perfect relationship. So, and I don't know if they're saying that, but it's a search beyond. The relationship is where we start, where you want to maximize this and learn about yourself and about others and your relationship in this world, your confidence, everything. But it expands into something that it is hard to describe or pin down, which is our relationship to ourselves and the cosmos. So, and our relationship to ourselves, and how we show up in this world, and why show up at all. Again, the question is like, no one's proved that we should show up except it's for the common good. But if we're evolutionary species, then the common good would be just maximize your societal obligations so that you can reproduce, and then go ahead and die off because you're done. You don't need you anymore. If we reduce it to that, there's something else about it.
One of the questions that came up in our conference on this topic of the next needed philosophy, to have a philosophy of men and women front and center, is to what degree should this be a conversation that we have alone as men in separation from women? To what degree do women or the opposite sex, whatever side of the fence you're coming from, what place does the opposite sex need to have in such a conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are certain conversations that can't be had in men and women combined. What specific, I don't know, but there's ways that men need to gather and talk about things to create an understanding that only they can access, and vice versa with women, because of the different. And maybe that sounds sexist, but it's real, and I don't mean it to be that way. It's just that there's ways that men can congregate and break bread together and have conversations about that. Changes the nature of it, changes if there's women present, and vice versa. Women can have conversations around, in the presence of them, that will change if there's men present. And so, but there's a larger collective conversation that needs to be had and explored. So I'm not saying that it has to be in isolation, but there's three different types of conversations that are necessary.
Mm-hmm. Can you say a little more about what is changed or what is lost if one woman comes into a room of men philosophizing on their relationship to women? And can you speak perhaps to what is the thing that can happen when no women are present?
Well, no, I don't. I can't put my finger on it, but because you could have a room, a salon, for instance, and the men are having a discourse on something that is deeply personal to men, and a woman could be present, and and absent the ideas that, oh, now I'm going to check my speech because she's pretty, or any of that stuff. Like, erase that. She just exists. There's still a way that she views the world through the feminine perspective that is different than the masculine perspective, and that not entirely, but in some aspects. And I don't know. I just think that the pure heart of man has to be explored with the pure heart of man in combination with each other, and the presence of the feminine would just changes the chemical imbalance in the air. I don't know. Changes the ether. I don't
Yeah.
know. The ether, magnifies into something else, and it's a good thing. But maybe men can't. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It just intuitively, it feels like there's conversations that need to have strong with men, deeply with men, that men, and then with women alone themselves, their conversations, which we can never encroach on, and men try to. And the collective, I just intuit it. I can't describe it, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
Yeah, I'm following you the whole way on this. And during the last conference, we're just coming out of a members' conference. I think we had one woman in the room at all times,
Yes.
which for me felt like a wonderful thing. And there is a level in which, as soon as you bring one woman in the room, then the breath stops a little bit. There is that checking. Oh no, like there's somebody here, and I feel that presence. It affects me, even if she's out the back and you can't even see her. There is a sense of halted breath and checking, or some gravity that there has, because there is a female present. Whether she's completely online and supportive with a devoted heart, or whether she's cynical and
Interesting.
looking to attack. I very much believe in this sense of the chemistry of the air has changed in the room. I'm just curious if I could pin you down, or pin myself down, to say, what is it? Like,
Yeah.
what is it that is possible when she's not there? and what is the difference that happens when she is there. What I found really interesting about this conference is, even though we had only one woman in the room both days, and usually we have more join us,
Yeah.
um, the effect of her was very pronounced, and I enjoyed it very much, and I don't wish it was different. Um,
Yeah.
but the significance of having one woman in the room, it felt like there were 10 women in the room. She was remarkably abundant in the feminine energy that she brought to the space. Whoever it was, right? I think there were two different women. But I'm curious about the thing: what is possible when man is alone, like staring at the core of his own male
Well, that's really
heart?
interesting because there's three. There's I've been doing public speaking and sitting in front of audience for many many years, and I detect it just occurs to me as you said this that I detected a difference in the way a man in the audience will show up. So if it's all men, someone will say, I just want to say something that relates to me, and he'll tell his story, or he'll tell something, or something that some realization he's had, or something very heartfelt and directed into the room. If there is a woman present or women present, I can see. I realize this. I can see that they want to say the same thing, but they check themselves a little bit to make sure that it is um, to make sure that it's to be uncharitable, that it sounds cool, or it's said well or something, because they want people to like them. They want the woman to to like what they're saying, and so they adjust it. I've seen that, and you probably have too. And then there's the third level, or the third type of guy who is that just going to say it, share it to men. He's conscious of the presence of the feminine energy there, and he overrides that and does it anyway. And there's a more sheepish type of um, embarrassed type of way of saying it, but he says it. So I'm going to be vulnerable and just say this. With men, I would just say it. I wouldn't say I'm going to be vulnerable. But with women present, the guys check themselves and try and correctly say it so that it doesn't make them look stupid or something. And
Mm.
the third thing is they say, no, I'm just going to be unfiltered and say it anyway. But they're conscious that they're doing that.
Mm.
That's weird.
So for years, you've been saying authenticity or honesty is the greatest aphrodisiac, one of your classic
Mm-hmm.
lines.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the mere
But
presence of one. It. Sorry, I missed that.
I said oversharing is not. Honesty is
Okay,
great.
yeah, right. There's a line and a certain sharpness that's needed within this. So honesty is the greatest aphrodisiac, and yet put one woman in the room, no matter how supportive or well-meaning, and honesty becomes a more difficult proposition for a man to achieve. He takes the sharp edge off the honesty.
Yes, that's what I'm
almost like
saying.
almost like there's a law of physics. The presence of a woman, no matter how supportive, beneficent, collaborative, wanting of your truth, just the fact that she's a woman there and the psychic impact of that makes it harder to actually be honest in the sharpest possible way.
That is correct. It's interesting, and you could see it physically from the front of the room. I can.
Yeah.
And I realize that. I didn't realize it, but I can detect that, and it's not obvious, but it's definitely there, and it may be in me too. Like if I'm talking just a group of men, I might have a certain tone or timbre or quality or way of saying things that is tempered if there's women in the room. I don't know, because I don't feel like
Yeah.
I do, but I suspect that there's something, or I'm aware of it, or I'm conscious that I'm saying something to men here, and women might be taken slightly different. I am definitely aware of that. Yeah,
There's,
that's
there was a scene in the movie course that we ran, and the male protagonist had just made a mess with his wife, basically, and he's walking around the room in circles, scratching his head, ruminating, and he says this one line. He says, "I'm trying to be honest, and it's not easy." And there's an exasperation in the way that he says that. And I looked around at the group of men that we had, and kind of collectively all of the men kind of softened and smiled like that. That said it. I'm trying to be honest, but it's not easy because there is this all like psychic influence of a woman there that makes keeping that. So when you say honesty is the greatest aphrodisiac, honesty is also the greatest challenge, because to keep the tip of the honesty so sharp and so true is a it's a test against physics, almost like the physical composition or the physical nature of the universe. For a man to keep his honesty that sharp is almost a test against nature.
Yeah. Well, because we're trying to maximize our influence and maximize our presence and maximize our possibilities. And our pure radical honesty doesn't do that. Radical honesty will filter out a lot of people say, well, I'm not drawn to that. And so we soften a lot of our opinions and soften a lot of our presence. And
Mate,
and the extension of that is we hide. So yeah, there's a psychological aspect of this now. No?
yeah, and it strikes me as a social, like the social instinct, and then the survival instinct, which is I don't want to be ostracized from the tribe. You know, I don't want to have my future possibilities of an elevated place taken away from me because I said something um, unattractive or dull or hurtful, or that's going to send the whole kind of female half of the tribe against me. So I said something.
Yes.
So
Yes. We're
so
it's
so to answer that question that was brought up, to what extent can this conversation happen together between men and women? I think like that's fundamental. We haven't spoken to that, but the necessity of having a conversation apart, as men alone in a room, as women alone in a room, is essential. Otherwise, we will not get to the sharp tip of the truth of the heart and what might be said or uncovered, and therefore understood by everyone
yeah.
present.
Yeah, we're just intuiting that. We don't know that for certain. It just seems that that's right. You know. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm convinced that that's right, but I can't explain why or what's different. We've explored it a bit, I think, on the psychological level.
And then a conversation clearly needs to happen together. Otherwise, we become aliens to each other.
You can't have a men's movement without the support and inspiration of women. Can't do it. That's our other thesis, because there's a ton of men's movements out there that are just in isolation. Men, beating drums and painting their faces and sitting in the forest and
Yeah.
covering themselves in mud.
And
And
and wi-
yeah, no, go ahead.
and women too, dancing
And
around
women,
and communing together and crying and
yeah,
healing and shouting at the moon and believing that there's no man on earth that actually wants to listen to any of this, and no men are interested in relationship. They're all just doing their engineering on the computer, and they're
yeah,
dull and they're
that's
switched off to this whole relational need.
yeah. So you need a men's movement, which is men, but you have to have it embraced by the feminine mystique. Otherwise, it's just I don't know. It's Lord of the Flies. It just goes go into the island, and see who survives. And with women, it's like if I mean they need their space. I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing, and they need their healing journeys and they need their womanly things that they womanly do, when they're in groups, but without the containing without the inspiring masculine edge, without the inspiring feminine edge, these groups can't they cannot blossom, they cannot flourish. They just become an isolated uh, head nodding um, exercise in what, self-expression, self-help. I don't know. I sound very critical here. I don't
So
mean to be.
I think this is the last question I'll ask you today, which is speaks to a longing that a lot of our members have voiced, which is, you say the real examination and an inquiry into our intimate relationships has to take a central place in philosophy moving forward for a
Yeah.
cultural kind of regeneration from this point. Um, and a lot of our members will listen to you and think, yeah, totally on board. I like this idea and I would like to facilitate this in the hometown where I live. I would like to have the salon. I would like to have the meeting point between men and women. And I would like to have the meeting point among men. And how can I do that? And
Yeah.
I wonder if, up front, you have any guidelines for how can I build community around this in my hometown? How can I facilitate a conversation with men? How can I facilitate a conversation with women? And the possibility for let's say, the positive regard and the real, that sense of everybody in the room also wanting to maximize the conversation because it can so easily collapse. All you need is one cynic in a group of men or in a mixed group, one cynic that is attached to bringing the whole thing down. And the conversation can really fall into the same old kind of apartheid and invulnerable platitudes that we see
Mhm.
online. How how to build a more enlightened philosophical conversation in your hometown?
Well, I think number one, you got to find people that are would want to engage in that conversation. So you've got to. It's a proactive thing. It's salon culture. Look up salon culture of Germany and France and stuff like that. There's a great book by Justine Colata, I think. Justine Colata called The Beautiful Soul. And it's all about salon culture and how it evolved. And
Oh,
salon
beautiful.
culture is, yeah. I met her when I was in she was one of the guests at one of the things I went to in Cambridge. Um, but I got her book from her. And the idea is that there's these people that want to have this philosophical conversation and they create it out of thin air because it's not going to happen, you know? And it was physical gatherings, obviously. Maybe now they have a salon that's on Zoom. I don't know. I don't know, but it's the act of coming together, sharing some tea or some wine together and communing with each other in person, which is why um, traditional religions are so one of the reasons traditional religions are so strong because you commune in person with each other. You gather, every Sunday, for instance, right? You have potluck meals, which is a fellowship. It's a fellowship. We're missing fellowship, and fellowship is a word that we don't use anymore. One of the words I'm trying to reclaim. You know, um, so you've got to just in your hometown go try and create this. Make an announcement of this. Try and get you and your friend, you and two friends, invite this woman, invite this other guy, and just say we want to have this conversation on this level about an artistic expression or something, where the theme of um, whatever self-awareness or curiosity, the theme of curiosity. I'm going to talk about the theme of curiosity, and just announce it and see who's drawn to it, and put feelers out there and put invitations out there. And then to keep the conversation from devolving into some guy dominating the conversation, you have to have a strong recentering personality to say, okay, um, because it can happen. You're just going to have to run a salon. there's people that ran salons in the past, and it could be informal, like Gertrude Stein had salons, I guess you could say, but she had all these, painters and writers and stuff into her home because that was a place to gather and have a conversation. And so, and maybe it was more informal, like people just come into her home.
Mhm.
I was having a salon here in Romania. Would we go every Tuesday evening into this restaurant that had lots of space and quiet, and we would talk there and stuff. And I wonder if the impact would have been stronger if I would have the salon in my studio, for instance. Because it becomes it's a different animal then. And I've had lots of gatherings in my studio, which are a different energy than just sitting around the table ordering food. I don't know. I got to think this through a little bit. But the gathering and the fellowshipping and the breaking bread together is what we're missing in society.
Mhm. And what I get when I hear you is this is something that has to be repeated over time. There has to be consistency to this. So it's not
I
like, oh,
guess.
I'm going to do a salon once every 6 months, people get some things, but that this has a place, a recurring place within the social calendar where this conversation can actually be deepened over time with people you get to know.
Yeah, it's interesting because men need a place to gather. I mean, we've always jokingly said we need a men's club. You know, some of the guys say a cigar place, so we can
Hmm.
sit and with our snifters of brandy and our cigars and just come together as men and like spend our evening there as opposed to spend our evening at home. So I don't know. There's definitely an appeal in something like that, and maybe it's in somebody's home. Didn't know.
As a footnote to this, because we started off with a question, why does the whole topic of our intimate relationships have to come back into this, right into the center of our philosophy or our philosophical pursuit on life? There's I've been following ever since I did the Vision Quest in 2018. There's a eco psychologist, actually, Bill Plotkin, and his map of the human psyche has been instrumental for me. It's one of the deepest things that I rest on when I do my coaching. And he talked about that the human soul and the psyche evolves through 8 major stages throughout its life, and you don't want to try and evolve too quickly, actually,
Yeah.
because you're every it says wonderfully, every stage that we pass through is actually the most beautiful stage, and you'll miss it once it's gone. And so development for me, I always wanted to climb up this ladder of psychological development so I could be free of all the painful lower stuff that was haunting me. But that sets you up to try and avoid and grow prematurely and miss out on the presence of life. Evolving too fast, too much self-help, basically. It's like
Right.
you missed out on the beauty of what you've got in front of you. But so Plotkin talks about this. There's a phase in your life called, and he's brutal, by the way. So he's brutal with his expectations of how he wants his reader and audience to step up. But he says that there is a phase in our life which is early adolescence. And his commentary is that basically the whole of Western culture is stuck in early adolescence.
Yeah.
And that early adolescence is mostly, if you're stuck in it or if you're not really getting it properly, you are conformist. So you kind of go along with everything around you, but you are also consumer driven, which is you conforming to what is doled out and you consume. It's a consumer conformist culture, and people receive what is doled out, and then their hope for themselves is to get by socially, get by and survive, get those needs met without really putting themselves to the test. So as long as I've got my comfortable, cushy place in society, get some sex, get some status, get some sense of power, then I can just kind of ride that out for the rest of my days, right? And the
Yes.
comfort zone is a zone of the ego, actually, where the ego doesn't have to be challenged, and I can stay here unchallenged and defend against what might come through.
Yeah.
And so Plotkin says, if you want to grow out of early adolescence, you've got 2 tasks. There are 2 psychological tasks. And the first one is to sink into and define and embody an authentic social self, which means you can stand up in public and disagree with another person, philosophically disagree, personally disagree, without that having to be kind of a war or an ego confrontation. But it means you don't actually have to dump down your truth when you show up socially. You can be authentic, even if that creates waves and makes the neighbors gossip, or that there's an inherent tension actually to be authentic versus conformist. And so if you can step into authentic despite the consequences and hold yourself and still have self-compassion, this is individuation. This is growing out of a sense of adolescence. And he would say that you've achieved this well if you can move around, move through society, and be accepted by the social groups that you want to be included by. So let's
Okay.
say there is a particular tribe that I want to be a part of because they reflect my values. Well, I can go into that tribe and I can meet those people and I can bring myself authentically, but also be accepted. Like say I want to sing in a choir or play in a punk band, I can go to choir people, I can go to punks, I can, I don't know, go into the specialty coffee shop or whatever little subculture that matches my values. I can go there, show up, be authentic, and also connect genuinely with the people and have an acceptance there. So I'm not like, God, I wish I was part of that group and I'm not. You know, those are all jocks. I'm a lowly nerd, never going to make it. And you're kind of fighting against yourself the whole time. So that's one part of succeeding in early adolescence. And the second task he says we have in early adolescence is to figure out what our sexuality is and learn to bring that to the world.
Yes.
So the things that most of us fall into here in life are repression. Oh, I'm not sexual, I don't think those things, or whatever it is. There's whole scale repression. And then on the other side, there's bravado, which is, yeah, I'm a sexual person. You know, look at me, shoot it up everywhere I go. Within the midst of that, there's a fine line, which is an authentic sexual self, which is not hidden, absolutely not hidden, but also not hidden under the mask of trying to appear more sexual, let's say, than you naturally feel. And so you got to find a way to bring that without hiding, which is massively confronting because of all the men and students and the clients that we know. To bring yourself sexually means you might again be shot down by people who take offense to your sexual nature.
Right. That's right.
A lot of this is a hallucination. A lot of people actually aren't bothered that much about this man's sexuality or not. But the hallucination that women are going to hate you for being creepy, as we've discussed, and so on, is a big thing for men to get over. And so, according to Plotkin, we live in societies where most people don't graduate from these two tasks. They sit in the swamp of incompleteness. And because they do, they never have the energy in their psyche to contemplate the mysteries, the great philosophical questions. They never have the disposable energy in their psyche to really go out wandering into the world and seek that which is numinous, seek things that might dissolve actually the sense of self in a way that could bring you something new. And so he's very much a vision quest philosopher.
That's interesting.
Which is you go on your vision quest, and ideally your sense of self is going to dissolve almost completely, so that you can commune with nature and then be open to receive some sense of vision or some sense of glimpse of your true identity, on which you can then construct a self into real adulthood. And so it's no good. It's no good being on a vision quest where you're thinking about some girl. You know, oh, you've got this limerent back and forth, needy, codependent thing about a girl that you haven't been able to express yourself sexually and express yourself authentically in. She's going to scupper your opportunities to meet the true nature, the divine. So these are, I would say, psychological tasks left unattended to that stop any real philosophical conversation from ever happening. Because I don't think a man and a woman can really have a philosophical conversation until they've socially
graduated
into a seated and complete sense of their own social self and their own sexual self. Here's a assumption. I don't think any real philosophy can start until after that point.
That's interesting. I'd like to read this or discover more about this. Send me maybe post a link or something. I would like to know about this.
Nature and the Human Soul. Yeah, it's been a big bedrock for my thinking.
Really, eh? I'll look it up.
So when we talk about cultural regeneration, like creating something that's inspiring, that's going to, save the world from the gloom of the moment, Whatever's created has to have a tinge of something holy, sacred, vulnerable,
Yes.
transcendental, true. It needs a truth beyond the thinking mind, and it needs a truth beyond our own self projects. I'm going to write another philosophical self-help book, so I'm in the marketplace. Look at my new book, everybody. So it
Right.
needs to go beyond that and have an authenticity to it. But we can't, as a human species, we're not going to be capable of that until we've resolved something. So that's where my thoughts go with this whole debate. Something like Ars Amorata is needed on the men's side of things, so that men can truly finally work out what it means to have an authentic social self and a well inhabited sexual self. Because if you
Yeah.
don't do those things, you're going to be. I don't
Mm.
think there's any true philosophy available.
Mm.
And it can take work, as we know, right?
As we know, yeah. Interesting. Mm.
So I'll ask you. I keep asking you at the end of these podcasts. This is my favorite coaching question, but what are you taking away from this conversation, or what strikes you
Well,
as we head out?
this is a very philosophical conversation, which is right up my alley. Um, I learned a few new things, ways, turns of phrases, and ways to say things, way to think about things on this call. And it was really just more of an exploration of the ideas and themes to me, and I hope it's relevant to the people who are listening, because it's very highly relevant to me. So I don't know. I'm sitting in contemplative curiosity and wonder about what we talked about. I want to look up these references, these books you talked about, and just thinking, how do we take what we've learned here, or what we've discussed here, and take it forward into the future of what we're doing with Ars Amorata. That's all. That's all for me.
Hmm. I, I'm left reflecting on that sense of abstraction, kind of philosophical abstraction, and what I'm left thinking of this philosophical edge on life and contemplating these themes are things that we're already doing, and the
Yeah.
conferences that we're doing are already these meetings, and the salons that I've had over the years are this thing in motion. It has actually happened. There's a tendency in me to think, oh, this salon somehow was a warm-up, this conference somehow is not the real thing. And when we're in the conference, I hear from people all around, how can I have this in my real life, or how can I have more of this? And that I kind of have to affirm, this is it actually right now. So
Yes.
the philosophical conversation is not something that we have in the future when we figure it out. We had it today. You had it today through listening to it.
That's
This men's
that's
meeting,
right.
apart from the one woman who was, clogging up the sharp edge of our truth, Marina, um, that is an actual thing that happened. All of the salons that we attempted to put on over the last 13, 14 years, they were real happenings of this. And it's easy for me to believe and others to believe, because I hear it in their language as well. This is not the thing yet. It's not the ideal. I have a picture in my mind of the ideal salon or the ideal thing when I'm ready, when it's set up, when it's actually happening. And I've got a very real sense of, no, this is it. This is all we've got. And the salons that we've done were real happenings. And if you do a salon
That's right.
in the next month, wherever you live, that will be the real practice and embodiment of this. There's no realer time in which this conversation is going to happen than already today. Even in our private members group and so on. This
That's
is
right.
it in action, in motion now. That has to be really remembered, because it's easy to be in the middle of the salon and actually not be in the middle of the salon and not realize what is actually taking place all around you, because you live in some
And
philosophical idealization of what it should be. Yeah.
planning for it, and it's already happening.
Yeah, I missed the conference because I was too busy thinking about the next one, right, or how it should be,
Yeah.
which is different to this.
All right,
All
Jordan.
right. Well, if you enjoy the episode and if you enjoy this podcast in general, come and have a more extended conversation with us and meet the members of the Amorati from all around the world.
Join
Membership
your
is
membership.
open. Yeah. Check out the
Go.
link below. Yeah.
Thanks,
Open
Jordan.
now. Thanks, Anne.